Welcome to the Show, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything. I'm Brady.
And I'm Katie.
And as you can tell by the title of this episode, today we're going to be talking about Galapagos lizard porn and how it affects the economy in France.
Bonjour! Actually, we're going to talk about music again because it's such an awesome topic that we just had to keep going, right, Brady?
Right, and we're pretty much going to be talking about it all day, so strap in. It's time for I Digress.
In our last episode, we were talking about the history of recorded media, and we made it up to CDs. So now what are we on to?
We'll briefly talk about CDs again real quick. It was the digital medium of storage for not just music. They made really high quality CDs, and that was what we did. DVDs,
And pictures.
And pictures. So a lot of your computer files you could store on CDs and stuff. So, but music was really easy to produce on a CD. So it became really cheap, really easy to use, and everybody adopted that medium for music recording. All of a sudden, they could just blow out millions of CDs, and so the pop artists were just eating it up. Everybody had a new CD coming out. It was much more often. It was easier to record their music onto the CD, so they were able to produce it faster. And so
it costs less for the consumer too.
So I think CDs lasted longer than any other type of medium, other than records, just because they were stuck in a rut. Well, that's a pun because that's how record players work. Essentially, a needle gets stuck in the rut. But with vinyl, they were stuck in a rut for a while on technology until it progressed into tapes. But CDs stuck around quite a while, and they're still recording under that medium today for record sales in stores, particularly. Because unfortunately, you cannot sell a digital media file in a store. It's just not how it works. There has to be physical things on the shelf, and that's something humans still love, is having a physical medium to grab off a shelf in a store, bring home, pull the wrapper off, throw it in your CD player, and listen to it.
Okay.
So that's still around. It's just not as popular as streaming. I don't exactly know, the complete origins of music streaming, because I think it all happened at once.
It just kind of exploded.
Yeah, because for a while everybody was using these portable CD players. And
the iPod came along.
The iPod came along after that, but for a while it was the portable CD players. But they were bulky. They didn't really fit in your pocket unless you were like the goth kid with the trip pants and you had these gigantic pockets
and
or
it skipped.
Cargo shorts or whatever. And it skipped as you walk. Like skip protection got pretty good after a while. But any little scratch on your CD, that's the other thing, was the preservation of the medium. It was almost a chore. Like you had to really watch your CDs. They couldn't get scratched because a scratch would basically corrupt the data if it was deep enough.
Yep.
So eventually that got phased out as the favored media. Again, we're still using it today because it's cheap, but the internet really pushed digital streaming. Not just the internet, the evolution of technology on the computer. Hard drives were getting bigger and cheaper to buy.
Yep.
So you could store more music on your computer, but not just your computer. Steve Jobs came out with this magical thing called the iPod. Everybody remembers the iPod. A lot of us had one, or probably still have an old one sitting in a drawer somewhere.
They don't have a Zune?
Yeah, Zunes. Yeah, I don't know if we talk about Zunes or not.
Yeah, it's right in there. Okay.
Sorry, Zune. I liked Zunes. I did not like iPods. The user interface was just not my cup of tea back then. I liked just a different user interface, I guess. But a lot of people like the iPod. They still do. You can even still buy iPods now. And they're you could buy a terabyte iPod, I think.
Really?
Don't quote me on that, but because of bigger hard drives, music on the computer became more popular. All of a sudden, you could just store thousands of hours of music or whatever onto your computer.
Even music you didn't buy.
Yeah. And at first, MP3 players and iPods, they couldn't really hold all that much,
No, they couldn't. They were pretty limited.
You could even still buy just a 1 gigabyte MP3 player. But luckily, so music on CDs was recorded as a .wav file. Typically, there's a couple other ones that were high fidelity, but for the most part, nothing was compressed onto the CD. So you had the raw audio from the master. It was an exact copy of the master. Well, to make the file sizes smaller in order to fit on the MP3 players or the iPods that were new at the time, since their hard drives weren't as big as a computer, in order to capture a full CD or more, you had to compress the audio into an MP3.
Okay.
I really should have done my research. I can't remember what MP3 stands for, but it really doesn't matter.
It's just
a compressed
file.
audio file.
Yeah.
So basically, they squeezed the data together. They were able to take out some of the samples. So like, technically, with the way human hearing works, it's just like with your eyes. With a movie, you're seeing a bunch of pictures flashed at you. With digital music, you're hearing a bunch of audio samples of the sound wave digitally reproduced and thrown at your ear.
Okay.
You can take a certain amount of that out and still have
You still hear
pretty
it?
high fidelity music and not really notice a difference.
That's
So they took
fascinating.
out as much as they could. They trimmed off like the peaks of the audio file itself, of the sound wave itself. They were able to like compress it down to where you couldn't notice the difference with human hearing. So the MP3 came out, and so file sizes got a lot smaller than the WAV raw audio, but was still good enough.
Yeah.
And you were able to just pack on like 4 albums worth of music onto like the cheapest MP3 player. And then iPod came along, and that was it was a cool user interface compared to the little clicky buttons of the MP3 players of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it had the cool little scroll wheel. Everybody liked the scroll. The first one didn't have a scroll wheel, by the way. It had buttons. It was just in a circle shape, and then they made the little touch screen
And
scroll
people got
wheel.
super excitable about
Yeah,
that.
so you had the user interfaces which closely matched the Mac computers of the time, and it just everybody liked it. It was cool. It was new, and with iPods, bigger storage, they were able to mass produce bigger hard drives to put on these. So all of a sudden, you had the ability to have 1,000 music albums on one
At your
device,
fingertips.
that
Yeah.
you could just plug headphones into, or plug into the aux cable on your stereos or your car or your computer. And so music archiving became a thing. Now, because archiving was becoming a thing, because you could store hundreds or thousands of albums on your computer or your iPod, here comes pirating. With internet becoming faster and more available in your home, it was a lot easier to just download the music, and you could pay for digital copies instead of CDs at the time too.
Singles?
Singles. iTunes really innovated this.
Because then the playlist came
Yes,
out.
you could
Playlists
make
are a
playlists.
big deal.
iPods really started the whole playlist culture.
They really did.
I mean, it didn't start. They popularized it because obviously,
it changed the way-
tape started
yeah.
the culture of it. But
it changed the way you listen to music. I think
Exactly.
it gave birth to the what is it? The research of algorithms tailored to what is
Yeah,
on your playlist.
iTunes really
and
did popularize
all
that.
of that. Yeah.
They were the ones starting to recognize what people liked and push tailored playlists to you. Spotify made this really, really easy, and their algorithms are very good. Spotify is probably top dog right now
Yeah,
in doing that, in tailoring playlists to you and
200
giving you new music to listen to, exactly relatable to what you like.
Well, and there's 232 million listeners of Spotify. It is
Yeah.
the biggest out of all of them,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of people. That's our whole country, or almost our whole country. 2/3 of it. You know, I know I'm American. I base everything off of America, but that's worldwide. That's
Yep.
still a lot of people.
Exactly.
Like, you figure 1/3 of those listeners have to be just our country alone.
That's a lot of people. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say majority is America.
Yeah.
America consumes
We are huge
everything.
music consumers.
So, of course,
We
music's
are.
going to be one of those things.
We're the Hoover of pop culture.
Yes,
No.
yes. But with on the topic of Spotify,
Yeah.
the model of that came from iTunes originally.
Oh.
But it was a little spendy when it first came out. You had to pay per track. You had to buy each track or each CD individually, and it cost just as much as going to the store and buying a physical CD. There was no price drop because it was digital. I think you got the same quality of audio if you bought an album on iTunes, or you could buy the MP3 version, but they cost the same. So people are getting frustrated with that. Well, the underground music enthusiasts decided we should have this for free, just like with bootlegging tapes, because you could no longer do that. You couldn't just record it. I guess you could rip a CD onto your hard drive and rewrite it onto another blank CD, but it was a process, and it took
Probably
a lot of
losing
time.
sound quality too.
Yeah, and we're talking it took just as much time to burn a CD onto your hard drive and then burn it onto a blank disc as like it did recording a mixtape.
Nature will find a way.
It took quite a while, and it wasn't fun. But everybody for a while, that was the thing. We all had our little mix CDs. It was fun. I loved it. I had tons of mix CDs.
I had a lot of mixed CDs because I didn't own an iPod. I just burnt my own music to the CD.
Before MP3 players were a thing,
Yeah.
you had your portable CD player.
Yep.
And you had a laptop, so or a computer
desktop.
or a desktop,
Yeah,
whatever your computer of choice was. There was this tipping point where it became pretty easy to burn these mixed CDs.
I had lots of them. I love them.
So rewritable CDs and rewritable drives were mass produced and got cheaper, and we all had mixed CDs after.
We
a while.
all did for a long time. They lasted quite a while.
I was never the kind of person to walk into a store and actually buy an album of an original album from the artist. What I would do is borrow.
You were folk.
Yeah, exactly. I would borrow the albums from friends and stuff like that, and I'd rip them onto my computer and make playlists instead of having the.
You were curating your music.
Yes,
which
I
is
was
what
curating my own
math
music.
does for us now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So album sales were still high. People were still buying the albums, but there was a lot of us who borrowed the albums and ripped them onto our computer and did it that way. Because that became so popular, all of a sudden everybody had all these CDs ripped onto their hard drive for making playlists, right? Or making mix CDs. So it wasn't a company, it was some programmers that decided to make a program where you could essentially connect one single folder of your hard drive to this program, peer-to-peer sharing, and anything you put in that folder would automatically be available to everybody else who used that program.
Holy crap.
So you could, it was an archiving dream. So that one folder would be connected to a server now all of a sudden, where a server could come in, pull a file off your computer, and put it onto somebody else's computer. Thus, the digital music pirating age was born. And eventually everybody knew about it. You could get it LimeWire, BearShare, BitTorrent wasn't as big back then when it first came out, but BitTorrent was available. All of these work differently, but mainly the concept of it was the exact same thing as I borrow a CD from Katie, rip it onto my computer, and make a mix CD.
It was just done
done through the internet instead of in person. So the legality was questionable. It was the same as borrowing. I was just borrowing through the internet that same CD.
It had been paid for. Well,
it was paid for.
Sometimes not.
Sometimes. Well, you'd get into this problem of legality because if I downloaded a album off of somebody else's computer through the peer-to-peer network, and let's say that person themselves had downloaded from somebody else, who bought the licensed version.
Okay.
So like somebody bought a CD.
Okay.
Sorry, this is complicated.
No, this is important. I want to know this because I didn't do this.
Peer-to-peer was amazing because if somebody bought the CD,
okay,
it was licensed for their for their
enjoyment,
personal
their
use.
Yep.
They put it on their computer and uploaded it to that folder that was all of a sudden connected to the peer-to-peer network. Then somebody else grabbed that CD to their computer.
Actually giving it to them, but yet
they were technically giving it to them.
Yeah.
It was the same thing as handing them a physical copy, but it was a digital copy.
So it's the same thing. It's just not
just like letting them borrow it.
Yeah.
That person grabbed that and borrowed it, right? And ripped it to their computer and made a CD, right?
Okay.
Well, if I were getting those same files from theirs, since they weren't the original license holder, now I'm committing a crime instead because I'm copying a copy.
How do you track that though? I remember
nobody could. That was the thing. Like it was really hard for internet service providers and record labels to deal with this because technically it was copyright infringement.
And that's when music became more about the performance and the brand than the actual music because they couldn't. I don't think they could. I don't think they could. I remember in the mid 2000s, like remember all those piracy things on movies and music and stuff.
It's because Congress would not outlaw the actual ways of doing it.
How could you
just like with VCRs back in the day? That's why I brought that up in the last episode. These big companies would go to Congress and be like, "Look, we're losing all this money because people are just downloading this," and then Congress decided it's not a big deal. Not worth our time to regulate and legislate.
Adapt your business model and make
money.
Adapt
your business model to make money.
Merchandise.
There were problems with people burning hundreds of DVDs and CDs and selling the copies because it was the exact same fidelity. So people wanted it. It was cheaper. They could sell a $20 DVD for $10 and still make a profit because all they did was pay for one like a 50-cent disc.
Well, I
burn it onto the disc.
I didn't realize this was such a big deal because we lived in the woods, obviously. Yeah. And I would just still be, I guess, lame Katie and buy or rent things when I honestly had too much work. But I remember going on a road trip with my dad. I think it was like 2012. We went to Tennessee and Missouri to visit family members. And it was a huge thing to bootleg ripped movies. Yeah. Like if you walk to any convenience store, somebody be all, y'all want to come back outside and see my supply? And I'm like, is he talking about drugs? And it was bootleg DVDs, and they were all like $3. He's like, I got the #1 new release right here, and I'm like,
I didn't realize movies still in theaters that were for whatever reason the digital file got leaked onto the peer-to-peer networks.
A lot of them come from Eastern Europe. Like
that too, yeah.
I saw a copy. Somebody gave a copy of this stuff to my kids, and it was like dubbed over in Ukrainian or something. And I'm all, what's going on?
Anybody who ever used particularly LimeWire to download movies will know exactly what we're talking about. Where you could get a bootleg digital file, but it would be in French, or there would be French subtitles overlaid that you couldn't take off just because of how they ripped the file onto their computer. Yeah. Or it would. So I remember Star Wars Episode 3. Mm-hmm. Okay, I pirated that. Sorry, I hope I'm not admitting any guilt here, but I legitimately grabbed that off a peer-to-peer network and onto my computer, and it wasn't even done being edited yet. The version I got. We're talking about an early editing screen, where some of the scenes would pop in with green screen. You just see the green screen and the actors doing their thing.
The ultimate behind the scenes cut.
And then it would pop into like back to where it was already finished and mastered. But it was weird. Like sometimes you'd run into things like that because when I did it, it was still in theaters. Well, so I was getting the editor's copy.
Do you think they had like a huge the music industry cabal, the leaders, the conspiracy people? They all got together and like, okay, we're not going to beat this, so we have to adapt. Mm-hmm. I feel like they did that at some point.
It was a collaboration between record label heads and the artists themselves. Like if you guys remember when Napster came out, I don't know why Napster was so popular. But I think maybe just they got the limelight because of the backlash from Metallica and other artists. It wasn't just Metallica, but Metallica is the most famous one. So Napster was a peer-to-peer program, just like them all. Okay. Just like LimeWire. But the only thing you could get from Napster was music. It was almost a direct clone of iTunes, except it was all free because it would rip the music files from other people's computers.
I think Napster was
from dedicated computers, and then it would put them into lists that looked exactly like iTunes. It was a very easy user interface.
Well, so Napster got popular. I think it was popular because of the user interface.
It was basically
very
free
easy
iTunes.
To use. Yeah. I never did have it, but I had friends that did. And
I think because it got so popular, it gained so much momentum, everybody was using it to get their music files. A lot of people are still using the other peer-to-peer networks. Don't get me wrong. I never used Napster personally when it became popular. I used LimeWire. I don't know why. I just liked it because I was also trying to get my hands on computer games and computer programs. My first iteration of Photoshop that I ever downloaded was a bootleg version from LimeWire. Really? It worked flawlessly because you had all these websites you could to battle this. Software companies would give you a little an access key on the box, like a code, and it was a one-time use. So once that code was registered to the program, nobody else could use that particular code. So even if you let somebody borrow the software disk, they couldn't use your code. I remember
when that was a big thing.
All these hackers decided to make programs where you could generate these codes.
Of course,
one-time authentic codes, because they figured out how the codes worked, how these codes were generated in the company. So they were able to create a generator for that, and it was open source. You could just go on and get a keygen for it because you downloaded the software illegally. Because technically, again, it was just borrowing. And literally, the model of peer-to-peer sharing is just like I let somebody borrow a VHS movie or a DVD or a CD. Well, and the thing is,
if they're not making money off of it,
it's
a really weird area.
But it was the same thing as basically borrowing from a friend. That's all it was. Obviously, maybe they weren't exactly your best friend. You don't know who they are that you're getting this file from, or even if they bought the license. But you were just borrowing it from them, okay? It was the same thing. The legalities, it was a big gray area. Congress wasn't pushing any enforcement to it until the artists got involved. Because the artists were starting to lose a lot of money because record sales went down.
Well, and they were used to the golden era of music, which was the 90s, as far as the most money made because you had cheap production of albums through CDs, and then you had all the big shows that we could do. And so they were making just a catastrophic amount. If you were a #1 artist in the 90s, you made bank.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just plummeted.
Because of peer-to-peer. Because of peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
And playlist culture as well. People weren't buying albums because they just wanted the one single.
They did. And so then I remember Amazon, because I've been an Amazon customer for a long, long time, and that was why I started it, is I wanted to be able to buy just singles. And I did. I didn't use peer-to-peer. I was weird and old, and I wasn't old, but I was actually very young. But I bought my singles, and then I made my mixtapes from that instead of borrowing them. But that's what most people want. They want that one song. Most people do not want the whole album, unless they're a super fan. Super fans are out there.
Super fans are out there. Yeah, I mean, everybody has one artist where you would buy the whole album,
I do have some
or listen
of
to
those.
the whole album. Now it's streaming. Now you would stream the whole album.
You would.
I do it all the time with metal.
It's different though. With
metal music, like, again, that's my cup of tea.
Yeah.
That whole culture is mostly about listening to whole albums, and a lot of the artists generate albums in sequence to. They go into making the album knowing everyone's going to listen to it from start to finish. So
because it's an experience.
It's whereas
most pop music, I feel very few pop albums.
Pop
is
all about
thing.
singles.
Yeah, it's all about catching them with that hook.
Have you ever listened to a famous pop artist's whole album? Like I really liked 4 or 5 Lady Gaga songs at one time. Mm-hmm. So I pulled up her whole album.
Was it disappointing?
And I thought I would like all the songs on that album because, again, in metal, if you like one song on the album, chances are you're going to like the other songs on the album. You know, with exceptions, of course. But I didn't like any other song on that album. Just those 4 that I went into the album. Like, I even bought the album, literally purchased the album because I thought I'd like the whole thing.
Because you like 4 or 5 songs, yeah.
Yeah, and I still only liked those 4 or 5 songs.
Well, and I think that's where playlist culture comes in perfectly. Is the algorithm knows, and it's all about catchy hooks and the same amount, and so then you get all the songs that are like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what's driving the industry now. We'll dive into that a little later.
Yeah.
The industry right now is all centralized on singles.
Yeah.
Almost because of just.
Well, some artists don't.
That's what's really what people are going to download.
They just pop out with a single. Like there's not even a forthcoming album. Yeah. It's just I heard it because what is it? Tame Impala. There's some bands that I like them, and I notice they'll just throw one single out, and I'm like, oh, did they have a drunk weekend or something? And they're just like, oh, this sounds good.
You're definitely seeing it more and more, where even bands who would put out albums and they're platinum albums, now they're just throwing out platinum singles.
Yeah.
Double platinum singles. And singles are the thing right now. And that's because of how the music industry has evolved. What's marketable, what's monetizable now is singles. We'll dive a little deeper into that in a minute.
Okay.
We're still talking about piracy here because
this is fascinating.
Piracy is what pushed us into Spotify age. I want to call it the Spotify age.
I think it kind of is.
Because that's the big one.
Yeah.
But again, Napster was almost a direct clone of iTunes, but it was free, and everybody was using that. And the artists started to suffer from this. The whole starving artist thing started to come back.
It wasn't just the people trying to break in.
Yeah, they were still superstars, but they were starving superstars. Okay, so like Britney Spears was suffering. Okay?
They were losing tons of revenue, tons.
Yeah.
They made most of it from their shows.
Though there were some artists that got famous because of pirating, just like it was back in the cassette tape days, where bootlegs would get passed around, and that's how people knew the artist. And if you liked them, you'd go buy it.
Ooh, that goes with the playlist thing. If you get included in a playlist and you're obscure, you become less obscure via plays.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's
how it works nowadays. Is how it worked back then.
Okay.
So, what was it? Soulja Boy.
Oh, Soulja Boy.
I'm just going to use him as an example. He's the most known one, where he would go onto these peer-to-peer networks and put his song, but he would title his song as one of the more popular downloads. So he would say, like, what was popular back then? Like if a new Nelly album dropped,
okay,
he would title his album as the new Nelly album. So when people went to download that, because it was popular, a lot of people went to download that, they would click on his version on accident, not knowing the difference.
Okay.
Because you would have an option of different people's folders to go through. So, like, if 100 people had that new album on their folder that was connected to the peer-to-peer network, you would have 100 iterations of that album in your search list.
So it's all about exposure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So if you happen to click on the one that was secretly Soulja Boy, then you would, this isn't Nelly, but hey, I like this.
Yeah, it's got a catchy hook.
Yeah. So he saw that trend and exploited it to get his name out there. Because he wasn't a number one at the time. Nobody knew about him.
But that's
until then, because everybody had his version trying to download the new Nelly or whatever it was that I can't remember exactly which one he used.
But he did.
I would have to go and look that up.
You'd have to look that up.
I'm just using Nelly as an example because I remember he did put out a big album back then around the same time.
Well, it sounds like marketing executives are still using that today. They're using it with AI and with the playlist culture is if they have a new, and even indie artists I was watching a video about that where you want to get a catchy hook in the beginning of your song and you want to get it as many playlists as possible. And they do it with a combination of both the algorithms and social media.
Yes.
So back then, peer-to-peer, it was just sneak it in that folder.
Yeah.
Name it that. And I think innovators, that's how you're going to make it, is what you're willing to do to get it out there.
Yep, exactly. Innovation has always been key in this industry. Almost any industry, really, but in music industry, a lot of things have been innovated. And it just keeps evolving. Like, I don't know where we're going to go from here with streaming.
I don't either.
I don't maybe
next.
we hit a wall. I don't know. Like, as...
Because you can't get much faster. I mean,
no.
You can't...
No.
Right now, depending on what service you subscribe to, if you listen for free, obviously you have to do ads. And I think that's also amazing, too. Not to go too off our tangent, but you can get anything almost for free now as long as you're willing to be advertised to.
Yeah.
And if you aren't willing, then you just pay some money. It's really up to you. It's this
Exactly.
complete custom culture.
Yeah, because right now, if you want to, you can go download iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify for free without signing up for the paid subscription service.
Yep.
And what you will get is essentially the radio with ads. You will get curated playlists based on the artists you search for, the song you search for, whatever, anything related. They have these very tailored algorithms to music related to your search.
Yep, and people.
And it'll eventually get to know. You can use the thumbs up, thumbs down. You can actually manipulate that algorithm to your taste.
Yep.
Even in the free versions. But what you'll get is the auto-generated for free, the auto-generated playlist essentially. And it can play. It'll play all day long. Eventually, it'll loop too because they also limit which songs make it onto the free version.
And you also have a limited amount of skips.
Yeah.
And they know that Americans especially like instant gratification. You are eventually, if you can afford it, you're going to pay for it.
Exactly.
I can tell you that. I've watched it happen. I've done it. Because I used to have free Pandora for a long time.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it and they played songs I like, but I was like, you know what? I'd like to try some of this other stuff. So and I think I have Spotify too, but I have the evil Apple Music. Never mind.
Surprisingly, there is a lot of streaming services out there. Which that contributes to the devaluation of music too, because you have Spotify competing with iTunes and Google Play and iHeartRadio and all these. There's a lot of new ones actually popping up too that haven't really caught on, but it's a niche kind of audience.
Well, and then there's
like
SoundCloud if you don't want to pay for anything. There's
SoundCloud.
A lot of stuff on SoundCloud because I find a lot of indie bands that way on that. What is it? Reddit. Listen to this. That is where I found so much cool music.
That's a great subreddit. By the way,
love that subreddit.
Yeah, if you're just in the mood to explore new types of music
from everywhere,
if you want to break out of that algorithm, that's pushing your taste.
Go to listen
and
to
go
this.
to something that you might not listen to often. Yeah. Go to that subreddit. What is it?
I think it's Listen to This.
r/listen to this.
It's amazing.
Yeah. That I recommend that too because then you can
then
you can add that to your algorithm.
You can.
But if you're stuck in your musical ways, your streaming service is going to know that.
Yep.
And they're going to only push music that you like. Now there's always sections where it says, okay, based on your tastes, here's new music you might like, but again, it's still going to be more or less like tailored to your taste. So,
and it's not the joy of discovery. It's discovery based on what you kind of like already.
Yeah.
Whereas with you go to some thread or you go to some forum, you're gonna find it on your own. Yeah. And there's something magical about that.
You kind of have to go searching now for music that you might not typically listen to, and I encourage everybody to do that.
Yeah.
Because there's some good stuff out there that you might not hear because of your algorithm.
Yeah, and take an hour and just even that Reddit feed. And it's not just one type of music. It is everything.
Mm-hmm.
I have found some. I didn't even know some of the genres existed.
Oh yeah.
Like, it just blows my mind.
There's a lot of genres.
I have every once in a while, at least once a month, I go on that tangent. Just like, I need some new music. Let's go see what I can find.
What I do is I follow the rabbit hole of the related artists.
I also do that.
Thumbnails on the artists I listen to typically, and I'll just keep going.
YouTube's
I find one
really
I like,
good at
add it to my library. My library is like no other. Like I just almost everything I just throw it on there. Some of the stuff I've thrown in my library I've never heard to this day, because what I like to do personally is generate this gigantic library of music I might like and just hit shuffle.
Yep.
Sometimes I'll go through, like, I want to listen to this album, so I'll put it on. But a lot of the time, I just hit shuffle, and constantly I'm hearing new music because of how I do that.
And also, like, then you're all, I like this, and then you go down that rabbit hole.
Yep.
What's like this? What can I,
Exactly.
I do that a lot.
But because there's not a shuffle all music in history button, it's all tailored to you because of these algorithms. There's not a shuffle all music in history button.
Invent that, please?
Yeah, I have to do it myself by making this giant library of music I've never heard, and hitting shuffle, and then I can manipulate the algorithm with the thumbs up and the how many times I've listened to the song, and by creating my own playlists of different things I've heard that I like.
Kitchen sink folder.
Yeah, exactly.
All the things.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of effort that has to go into doing that because you can't just hit a generic library of music. It's all based on a genre or based on a related artist or based on a song you might like. So you're kind of like boxed in nowadays. You have to really put effort into going out of that box. So I encourage you all to go out of that box and search for music you might not have heard of before.
Because I have playlists that have electro, swing, and djent in it. So it's like, it just, you can't get much more of our, I want, and I love it. I want all the things because that's how we discover stuff.
Luckily, public playlists are a thing now. That also came from LimeWire.
Did it?
At first, because you could, again, it was just a folder on someone's computer acting as a server. Mm-hmm. And if somebody had created a playlist in that folder, you could search for that and grab it.
And then awesomeness was born.
Yeah, you actually had the ability to type in somebody's IP address, and if they had a folder linked to LimeWire, you could get into their whole folder just by searching for their IP address, and they'd have all sorts of files. This was one of my favorite things to do. You could actually go to like an album that you liked and see whose folder had that iteration of the album.
Okay.
And go into their entire folder and look through their files. And it was really cool. Like, I found a lot of cool music doing that. That's how I used to find new artists.
I sort of feel like I missed out on something. I was too busy doing, like, pastured poultry and raising pigs and stuff, and I missed out on this whole... It's like a treasure hunt for music.
It was a treasure hunt.
I know,
LimeWire,
sad right now.
That's what the appeal of these peer-to-peer programs were. It was a treasure hunt.
It really... I could have got lost
free.
in there.
It was completely free.
There's no way I had time for that.
Yeah. There wasn't even any ads associated with any of this stuff. Like, no big corporations were making money off of this. And that's how we'll segue back into Napster.
Well, I think so, because if there had been a Patreon with the LimeWire so that you could have gave the artist a tip, I think people... Because that's another thing. People are getting better about, hey, we're not going to have this stuff if we don't give back a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was also born because of all of this.
Exactly.
People have always been Patreons of things, or patrons, excuse me.
Yeah.
But that whole idea of like Patreon where you pay someone who makes content that you like, that has really taken off.
Yeah.
And I think it was because we had that whole thing happen.
Exactly. That's always been a thing. Because again, back in the cassette days, if you liked Metallica's bootleg album that your friend had, or Megadeth, the new Megadeth album that your friend had, you're going to go buy it. And that's how Patreon works, essentially. It's not just with music, though. Patreon, like if you have a podcast
or anything,
if you do digital art,
you make kitty t-shirts,
anything.
Yeah.
If you basically are an artist or a visionary, if you create anything, people like it, they will donate. Part of the reason we started this podcast is because I got on Twitch streaming, and I was starting to watch some of the more obscure Twitch streams.
Obscure.
There would be people on there with 1,000 viewers who were just sitting there talking about nothing. They weren't even doing any kind of like subject like we are or anything. It was just them talking about their day, talking about their week, and then they'd beg for money, and people would give them money through the Twitch stream just to be able to be a part of the chat, a part of the culture, and socialize through digitally through the medium of Twitch. And that gave me the idea, like, if people are paying for that, maybe we can monetize a podcast and actually provide some content that is a little bit more of that content.
Well, and I think it's just about content. That's how my blog works. My cryptocurrency blockchain blog is it. I make content for people. Recipes. It could even just be a picture, because for someone who's stuck in a 60-story high-rise, a picture of a little baby goat being born is a big deal, and it makes their day better.
Exactly.
I didn't realize that, though, because you get so inside your own bubble.
Yeah.
That you don't realize that, hey, some people might want to see this, and they might be willing to give you a nickel for it. And I think that's an amazing thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, farmers markets kind of work that same way.
That's true.
Flea markets. At those. Yeah, you just sell.
You know what it is? It's about people getting to know you. Everybody has a personality. Some of us have more bubbly ones than others. But like at a farmer's market, people walk up to me and they're like, "Hey, you grew this lettuce. How did you do that?" And it's not so far removed, because like let's go back to music. Packaged corporate music. You don't know any of those people.
No.
But a local indie band, you can go actually talk to Bob, the guitar player, and get to know him. And hey, Bob's got kids, and that's the inspiration for this riff that I'm playing right now. And I think that's what the internet does, is we might not be able to sit with each other, but we can actually kind of hang out.
Exactly. Yeah, the internet definitely pushed that.
And I love meeting people.
But that's, I think, something that's becoming big nowadays is the artists having to change the way they monetize because of the devaluation of music. But let's talk about how we got to the devaluation of music in the first place. Because music used to be very valuable. Like your typical popular artists were making millions, you guys, millions of dollars off of album sales, their tour, because they'd get a kick at the door of the bar, and their merch. And so it was a really big money-making machine.
If you made it, you were
even despite all the pirating. Again, if you pirated an album and you liked it, a lot of the times maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was just because you wanted to genuinely support that artist because you liked them, you'd still go buy the album. A lot of people did that.
I did that. Or their T-shirt, or you'd buy something.
It wasn't all bad. It wasn't all nefarious. Yeah, you got free stuff, but if you didn't like the album, you could just delete it. You wouldn't have to spend your money on it and then just not like it.
Well, there is a school of thought, if you give things away for free, you can actually make a bigger living, because people are going to want to buy that which they got and like.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like it's the same concept as advertising.
It is.
Essentially, you could give your product out for free and not advertise, and just the free product would pull people in and be your advertisement, and then they'd pay for the better version or whatever, you know what I mean? That's how advertising works. They're just throwing away millions of dollars to put out commercials and magazine ads and pop-up ads on the internet and to get in front of you. It's the same. They would lose just as much money by giving away something for free just to introduce you to the brand.
They're going to pay someone to advertise it anyways. Yeah. Well, and if you're genuine and you give away, if you have something of value, content that people want, then they'll eventually pay for it.
Artists are doing that nowadays.
Yeah.
I think it was back to Lady Gaga again. Mm-hmm. I think she released a album a few years ago that was like $1.99 for the whole album.
I think
just because of how streaming culture works nowadays and how you get so little money by per stream.
Yep.
She released an extremely cheap, affordable album, and it went platinum, I think, or gold or something. A lot of people got it into their hands because of the cost, because of the way the industry is now. But anyway, back to how we got to there. We keep kind of going off here, but
well, it's okay. I think it all correlates.
But again, so with Napster, they got in a lot of trouble. Yeah. Finally, they were starting to enforce these copyright infringements, and the peer-to-peer networks were getting shut down, and all this bad stuff. And then you started seeing all these piracy is bad ads all over the place, trying to discourage people.
Well, I think that was part of the settlement, wasn't it?
Yeah, part of the settlement. They had to do that. Yeah. But Napster was shut down overnight.
Oh yeah, they
eventually made a comeback and started charging because of how streaming services work nowadays.
Do they still exist?
Yeah, but it didn't sway a lot of people. A lot of people were still pirating music, and so all of a sudden the industry had a choice. They were to adapt and try to figure out how they can still monetize it, or they were to just completely go under, and artists weren't going to get paid, or they would have to produce their music on their own, or
everything
you name it, it was going to go under. Basically, pirating was actually making the industry suffer, and because of the more popular artists losing enough money to buy a new yacht, they weren't happy. Just put it that way. And it wasn't all greed, but there were a lot of popular artists who were getting pissed because they were losing.
They actually lamented about it in the media.
Yeah.
I remember.
And we were expected to feel sorry for these super, super rich superstars losing a little bit of money over pirating.
Instead of adapting
to
progress. Which they're supposed to be progressive.
Guess what happened? The record labels, again, people were still pirating, so they were still losing money. They decided to adapt instead of go under. Because some of the bigger record labels were either being swallowed by the bigger ones, or they were actually going out of business.
Yep.
And artists, they were without a way of distributing their art. So they would have to go and sign lesser contracts with these bigger record labels and still not make as much.
Yep.
So they decided to adapt. And they I guess they teamed up with a lot of like some tech companies.
Okay.
At the time. And particularly, I think iTunes might have been the first one to start offering the paid subscription service.
I think so. Yeah, it was like $9.99 and you could...
Exactly. I want to say it was iTunes.
We'll have to look.
I don't think it was Spotify. No. I remember the very first version of Spotify was identical to Napster. It was free. I used it. I was giddy with joy when it first came out because I'm like, this is way easier than LimeWire. I was still using LimeWire back then, or BitTorrent.
It's way easier.
And so I was so excited to just be able to have all of this music at my disposal for free, streamed instantly. It was my first taste of the streaming industry before it was monetized. It was free. Yeah. And I think they might have done this as an introduction.
To catch us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it didn't get shut down over legal matters necessarily. They just stopped.
They adapted.
And then 2 weeks later, it came back up and started charging a monthly subscription.
Yep, they adapted.
And I was like, I really liked Spotify. I loved having all that music at my fingertips like that. And I paid for the free trial.
I can find this much money a month, and that's just it. You'll find the money a month for what you love.
I think back then it was like $14 a month or something.
Ooh,
and
that's a lot.
I paid for it for a couple months because I loved that. The way it was set up was just like LimeWire, but no more guilt, no more doing it illegally, no more.
You were above board.
Yeah, no more scary letters from my internet service provider saying you shouldn't be having these files on your computer. We're shutting you down till they delete them. Like that was a real thing that happened.
I lived in the woods. I didn't have fast internet for this stuff. Okay.
A lot of people know about this, especially with BitTorrent. I don't want to really get into how BitTorrent works and stuff like that.
I want to do that someday.
It was real sketchy. I'd like to know about. We can do a whole episode on. We almost did do a whole episode on just peer-to-peer sharing, but I want to get into.
But it's important. It's part of our history. So
basically, streaming services came out of the pirate. Like nobody was stopping pirating. Law enforcement didn't have enough resources to completely nip it in the bud. So the music industry adapted. All these big record labels invested in these tech companies and started giving them kicks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, millions of people would be paying $14 a month. That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
When you have millions of people doing it. Yeah.
But it was up to these companies to distribute that money. If it's anything I know about tech companies, they're all about pinching pennies on the bottom end.
Yeah.
So the model changed almost overnight to artists made fractions of a cent per stream, and it was like that from the beginning. It didn't evolve into this. It was like that from the very beginning of streaming services. Artists made very little money on each song stream, but the more popular artists were still streaming millions of times a week to millions of listeners. They were still making quite a bit of money. It was almost It was almost no difference between that crappy contract they had to sign with the record label and the streaming service.
If you already had notoriety as an artist, you would get millions of streams. So because I had their big playlist equals big streaming numbers equals a living. Even if you're indie, they said if you get quite a few plays, you can make a basic living. You're not going to make the millions that like the Beatles did, but if you're reasonably popular, you can do this.
Yeah. But because of the increase in streams and the decline in CD sales, record companies were still losing money. They weren't in danger of going under quite as much as when pirating was big, because a lot of the people who were pirating switched over to the streaming services.
Yep.
So, but here they also had to make a lot of tough decisions. They had to cut smaller artists off completely. They had to basically limit a lot of the things that they were doing. So,
and ad revenue became a bigger thing.
Ad revenue became a bigger thing too. Yeah, because again, there were still these free ad-driven versions of like how Spotify and iTunes were.
Yep, and YouTube.
And so the advertising companies were paying instead of the subscribers. Again, we're talking still fractions of a cent per song.
It's
because it was the tech companies getting the money now, all of a sudden, not the record labels, but the tech companies were expected to give the record labels money, and the record label was another. So they get two middlemen all of a sudden.
So more fingers in the pie.
More fingers in the pie.
They don't
so
even
artists were making less and less.
Now.
So in a year's time span, all these artists were like just not getting paid as much, and all of the indie artists who were at least making a decent living doing from record sales and stuff, they basically just completely incomeless at this time. So they had to basically sell their merch at a higher price. So the entire industry just completely evolved. Like it was almost insane. In a year's time span, it went from one thing to a completely different thing. It was insane.
It's still evolving.
It is still evolving.
It's still not settled. I noticed they're trying all these new things all the time. You know, subscription services vary about what you can get, what you can't get. Like, I have my Apple Music thing. I can pretty much get everything on the planet whenever I feel like it, and it costs a little bit, but music's important to all humans. Well, 95% of humans.
Yeah. And it's harder than ever to pirate music now, so it's a lot easier just to go pay for a Spotify subscription.
Yeah, pirating has changed too. They've adapted the technology to make it's hard to pirate anything, I think.
Yeah, and it's more risky because now the internet service providers know more what to look for, and they'll shut you down quick now. So
the world has actually gotten smaller in digital land.
It has, and but now it's resting. The music industry is resting on the shoulders of tech companies and not record labels. But we still have the record labels as a middleman. So there's all these fingers in the pie. I still don't understand why these artists are still using record labels to produce their music when it's so easy.
To do it yourself.
here's what flooded the market. You had the popular artists using these like very renowned recording producers to make this awesome, really, really high quality music. It sounded great. Mm-hmm. But again, the technology evolved to where the recording software and stuff got a little easier to use and cheaper for free even. So now your basic indie band could just record they could record a 3,000 song album if they wanted to, right in their bedroom, if they had the time, and then pop it right onto Spotify for I think you pay like $20 and put out your album on Spotify.
So the quality differential shrunk.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty much an equal playing field now.
It is very equal playing field.
High quality studio full of expensive executives and producers.
Yeah.
You pretty much can do it in your bedroom.
They're still around and they're struggling to stay afloat and not drown.
And be relevant, really, because
we're going to see the end of major record production.
Or they're going to have to adapt.
Or they will have to adapt somehow. I'm not sure how they're going to do it.
What about the new music model?
Because now Drake can just buy a laptop and record his whole album by himself. He doesn't need all these executives telling him what to do. There is a huge element of PR still, though, because again, as an artist now, because you're gonna fall under the same thing as the record labels are. You now have to be more relevant to make.
You got to be exposure.
Yeah.
Exposure's huge.
So there's still an element of PR involved in the whole thing, and you're gonna probably still want those people as your middleman now, but you don't need like these high quality like production artists to record your music anymore.
You need a media manager more than you do a production artist.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Well, and I also think too, because attention spans are super, super short, you've got to grab someone in like the first, was it 8 or 30 seconds, or they're going to skip on. Mm-hmm. So songs are shorter. Everything has changed. Yeah. Like the whole thing is.
We definitely have to talk about this because of the model of music streaming now. More and more people have access to every song that's available on those services. So playlists are huge now. Everybody's got music going on in the background because it's really easy just to pull your phone out and listen to music. It's a lot of people have music just in the background now, and artists are even noticing the trends and making music that's more appealing to just be on in the background of your normal daily life. Mm-hmm. So
there are playlists for that.
It's changed the way people make music. It's changed the way people record music, cheaper and less quality. It's changed the way music is monetized. The entire industry is way different. We're still treading new waters in it.
We are.
But
it's kind of exciting now.
The entire media industry itself, the overarching media industry of movies, music, podcasts, you name it, whatever, they're all competing for people's attention.
Yes.
And because there's so much media to consume due to Netflix and Spotify and podcasts and the news and Facebook and Twitter, there's so much
noise.
There's so much noise, there's so much to consume, and we haven't gained more hours of our day.
No, we have not.
To compensate for that. So basically the market share is stretched very thin. Mm-hmm. So now we have to compete for smaller chunks of people's attention. And that's why nowadays you'll hear shorter songs because again, people don't have as much time to devote to listening to the new hit single. So the singles got shorter.
Well, and
so
I think
the music industry is adapting to this.
I think it goes back to your Twitch thing.
But is it getting really better or worse? I don't really know.
I don't know. Well, and like your Twitch thing where you said 1,000 people are watching someone just talk about talking
and so giving them money.
Is it because that's authentic? It's an actual human there instead of something so overproduced that it's just. Have we gotten used to things being so perfect that we seek the imperfect?
I think so. Yeah.
Because it feels more real.
Yeah.
It all correlates. I don't know, because like streaming is half of all revenue. I'm reading. Well, that's a lot.
Exactly.
That's a lot.
That kind of goes into going to bring up metal music again. Shout out to all you metalheads.
Never be sorry.
For everybody else, I'm sorry, but you just deal with it, okay?
That was very metal of you.
This was a phenomenon when metal started out as counterculture and then became mainstream a little bit with. When rock stars were the thing. Like
Slayer and Megadeth.
Yeah, when rock stars were the thing, metal started to pop up into the mainstream just a little bit. The heavier metal, like Ozzy Osbourne and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was there.
It was a little less counterculture. It started to become more corporatized, okay? Because it started to trend. Well, people were seeking that, especially metal fans, because again, we wanted it to be counterculture. We were seeking the impure, the imperfect. And that's where the evolution of the extreme metal genres came into play.
So it wasn't authentic unless it was extreme.
Exactly, yeah. If it sounded like you recorded it with a $2 microphone in a $5 Home Depot bucket, That was the thing a lot of metalheads loved.
Okay.
It had to sound raw and horrible. It had to sound terrible because we didn't want that corporatized pop music.
So authenticness, I can't even say it, but you know what? I can't say the theme you're getting here is that people are searching for the authentic, but they also want accessibility, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It might be the uncanny valley effect.
Oh, explain.
So in robotics, they noticed this phenomenon called the uncanny valley. If they synthesized a human face, even no matter how close or how detailed it was, if we could tell it was fake just a little bit, it struck this weird like anxiety in us.
Oh.
We could tell it was fake.
So it had to be a little bit
off.
Yeah,
it was almost too pure, too synthesized. We could tell. I think that effect is seen through music nowadays. The music quality is so high, everything's so synthesized. Yeah, it sounds amazing. It's very clear, but it strikes that uncanny valley just a little bit. We can tell it's too pure. It's too...
That nose needs to be a little crooked.
Yeah, and not even just the quality of sound, but the aesthetic of the music. Remember when we were talking about records and tapes back in the last episode?
Yeah.
There was a authenticness to it, I guess.
Well, it sounds raw and real, and the aesthetic...
Now the aesthetic is like homogenized almost.
It's like the Stepford Wives of the aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's too perfect. And I don't like, I can't walk out of my house without tripping. I want my music to trip up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
I do.
And I think a lot of people have that same desire in their art.
Well, because
it's straight, it goes from, there's almost like a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Where you have art, it's trying to make a statement, it's trying to invoke a feeling, and then you have that corporate line.
Let's make money.
Let's just freaking monetize this.
Well, and they're not the trendsetters, corporate America, in our country. They follow after. You can get on any Instagram feed or TikTok or any of those places, and you can see the people that are just ahead of everything. And then some market
those are usually the trendsetters.
Yeah, some market executives like, ooh, this is the next big thing. In fact, I think they have employees that look for this stuff now.
Yes, they do.
And then, how do we market this? How do we monetize it? And it's like, I think a lot of us don't really care about that. But yeah, we don't want to be left out. Because that's the FOMO. You know, that's a huge thing.
Gotta keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah. I don't want to miss out on this. Yeah. And so I think that they have all of this as a business model. And they know if they can just keep up and be a little bit ahead of everybody else, they'll be like, oh, I want this. Yeah. I got to listen to this music. Are you listening to that? And I feel like that's another thing with music. People, they kind of like, I got this music over here. I bet you haven't heard of it. Or I listen to this and it makes me better than you. There's this whole cliquish aspect to music that just drives me bananas because I like all of it. I know a lot of people say that to get out of arguments, but I really do like most music.
I trust me when I say I've experienced this firsthand. Again, I listen to metal. Yeah. It's almost one of the more despised music genres because it's very raw. It's not the most appealing sounding music to the general public. You know, because it's a lot of yelling and screaming and anger and hate and darkness.
I think it makes some people uncomfortable.
I might do a whole episode on metal because of this.
I think we might have to.
What it is like, life isn't all puppy dogs and rainbows. Mm-mm. Sometimes we're sad, and a lot of people listen to sad music.
Some metal gets you through depression. Happy, though.
But with metal, like, you get angry in life. You get energized in life. Yep. You think, like, death is a part of life. So it's just an art form that talks about that, expresses those feelings. And so a lot of people don't really want to go down that rabbit hole in the general public because they just want their nice happy background music or dance music.
Which is fine. It's not for everybody. But I hate it when they look down or disparage people because of the type of music they listen to. It drives me bananas.
I call them the toxic gatekeepers.
Toxic gatekeepers.
People. Oh man, rock and roll is full of this right now, you guys. It's not even funny. Like, if you like Five Finger Death Punch, the frickin' gatekeepers of what's good rock music are going to hate on you.
How about if you just say, I like Nickelback?
Yeah,
it's over for you. It's over for you,
That is the biggest one right now.
Yeah, it is.
If you go to any group of rockers or metalheads and you say, I like Nickelback,
it's over.
It's over because those gatekeepers don't like Nickelback.
It's fun just to say it, just to get a response.
If you don't kiss the ass of the gatekeepers, you're just gonna you're not gonna be cool, so you lose your social credit. We talked about social credit in the negativity
my
episode.
social credit score went backwards if I like something they don't.
It's
but
weird.
Why do they get to decide? Rock and roll is supposed to be about rebellion, and you're letting some random dudes on the internet like tell you you can't like that. You're a poser. Why do they do that?
I don't know. Again, it's a social credit thing. Some people just think they're the ones that decide what's a good trend or whatever. I don't understand that. We should do an episode on that later down the road.
We should on gatekeeping. Period.
Gatekeeping,
I'm gonna write it down,
because that happens.
We need to talk about.
That happens in every art form.
It happens everywhere.
Everywhere.
What neighborhood you live in? What?
How
about gluten free?
Oh God, yeah, vegan,
food,
vegetarian,
all of them.
Just the entire cancel culture pretty much is fueled by this whole concept.
I also want to talk about. I hate coercive compassion.
Yeah.
I hate it with a passion because it's stupid. You could be passionate about something like metal, and then who cares if someone else doesn't like it? It's not like you're trying to beat them with the guitar. It's just, this is what I like.
Well, I mean, I love when my eardrums get beaten with heavy, brutal guitar tracks. Don't get me wrong. Not everybody loves that, though.
I ride in a truck with my
brother.
Again,
a lot of people want their homogenized pop music.
And that's okay for them, too. Like, if that's soothing to them, like, if you want to listen to Taylor Swift all day long, I'm not going to be mad at you.
I don't shame anybody for their music taste. I love all types of music.
I do, too.
Metal's my favorite, but I literally, go through all sorts of different genres all the time. Like, I'll listen to, the weirdest stuff sometimes.
Well, you might have your classic country dubstep day.
Yeah.
It happens.
But this brings me to one of the points, because of the way music streaming is set up, because we have so many genres at our disposal, now these gatekeepers, especially the corporate gatekeepers and the trendsetters, the corporate trendsetters, are looking at it going, well, country music looks like they did better this month. So, we're going to have the popular pop artist over here do a country collab. And this has happened for a while, and now all of a sudden, all these genres are just amalgamating into almost an unrecognizable genre of goop, I call it. Music goop.
And it's not about being creative, it's about making money.
Yeah.
And I am all for artists need to make money, but to make money solely for the sake of making money takes away the art. I feel like you've got to balance it out some way that people can eat and be successful, because whoever puts the work in should get paid.
Yeah.
But then, and I mean that for corporations too. I don't hate corporations.
No.
They exist for a reason, and it's because of us.
Yeah. And they do have to survive. They do have to figure out ways to survive.
I don't like how they manipulate our people in charge, but that's a different podcast.
Tinfoil hat.
Yeah.
The length of this episode is coming up on an hour again, so I think we're gonna have to break this up into 3 parts. I think next time we'll put our tinfoil hats on and dive into the conspiracies in the music world.
And and maybe talk about how music affects us, like mood and physical performance.
Exactly.
There's a lot, like, do you run faster with your headphones on? I know I do.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of other stuff we can talk about.
It's cool, because music and neuroscience is interesting. Conspiracies are always interesting. I
love conspiracies.
I want to talk about how music created the concept of superstardom, because that wasn't a thing until then.
Oh, totally.
Until Elvis, I think, was one of the first ones in America, at least.
Like the Beatles, they said couldn't read music.
The Beatles were
and
huge,
yet they became the ultimate music people, of all time. Yeah.
Everybody knows about the Beatles. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
If you haven't lived in a box or under a rock your whole life, you probably know about the Beatles.
Yeah.
And you probably know about Elvis Presley.
What is that phenomenon, like the superstardom thing?
Exactly, and the fact that we still have superstars even after everything we talked about today with the whole how it evolved into not making a lot of money. They took the money out of superstardom.
Yeah, it's different. They said there'll never be another. Well, I love when they say never, but in this current age, because of streaming, there's not going to be another Elvis, so to speak, and maybe there will be. Maybe YouTube, maybe something we don't know about. I think it's fascinating.
Are we getting any cultural phenomenon like we had with Elvis? He was a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, and
so was the Beatles.
And
there's probably plenty of them since then, but those were the 2 big ones because everybody knows about them.
I get very excited about that dormant star or genre or big thing that's going to pop out, kind of like that Friday song. That stuff happens too. Like weird things just pop out, or Gangnam Style.
We have to talk about Gangnam Style. We have to
talk about that stuff.
It literally broke the internet. It's a really cool story. If you don't know about it, you'll hear it on the next episode because we're going to talk about it a little bit.
Okay, so we're going to talk about music phenomena.
Exactly, especially the conspiracies, because I really want to put my tinfoil hat on and talk about the Illuminati in music.
Oh,
because
I don't even know about this.
how superstardom generated these awesome conspiracies in the music industry.
Well, until next time, then tune back in for that one. We'll check it later.
Yep, later. Thank you for listening. As you know, we like to end every episode off with a positive news story.
So our story this week is Canadian scientists used MRI scans to analyze the brain when listening to unheard songs, and they found that listening to new music is actually good for you. The link to this article is in the description if you want to check it out.
And if you were hoping to know more about how Galapagos lizard porn affects the economy in France, well, you're on your own. Good luck with your search history there. And if you like our content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you want to know when our next episode drops, make sure you hit that bell icon as well, if you're on YouTube, of course. And don't forget to smash that like button.
Au revoir!